Hi, Nerd Faithful. I'm Rick from thebigbanglife.com. I'm here at JordanCon 7 with guest author Allan Kemp. Allan is known for his urban fantasy series, I believe it's called Black Phoenix.
The Black Phoenix.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us today, Allan.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your series. I just heard about you this week, and I looked a little over some of the descriptions and looked really intriguing. So what kind of...
It's an urban fantasy series that takes place in Atlanta. Part of the idea is that in a lot of urban fantasies, one thing is the city is a big part. And so I imagine, well, what would Atlanta be like? And it kind of became, to be honest, a satire of Atlanta, because Atlanta is a city of neighborhoods. And I thought, well, in a way, the supernatural reflect the people who live in those neighborhoods. An example being that Midtown is predominantly gay men. Well, what is a vampire but a well-dressed man with an oral fixation? So that was immediately, okay, there's the vampires. Well, what were werewolves? Well, werewolves were gangs who were violent but very dedicated to each other. So what's that but African American gangs who live in the West End? So I thought, well, it couldn't just be that. They had to actually own the city. So it was the idea that they were now in charge, and humans like you and me, well, humans like me, were kind of the serfs to their lords.
Oh, well, I was looking over the descriptions when I saw werewolves and vampires. That intrigued me, because I guess with urban fantasy sometimes you don't really, they sometimes touch on that, but it's like, does that make sense? I like the whole, it's almost like West Side Story,
That they don't get, my idea was, and I didn't want to get too far, so I kept with pretty much wizards, witches, vampires, and werewolves, because they're sort of traditional. We grew up with them. I grew up watching, those kind of movies and loving them. And yeah, they don't get along. They shouldn't.
Yeah.
And if they do, it's for a short period of time, then it's all politics afterwards. So I really played off of that as well.
Absolutely. So what kind of inspired you to start this particular genre?
I had always liked vampires and werewolves, but I think it was the Sookie Stackhouse novels by Charlene Harris. I read hers, and that led me to read more, and to read more about urban fantasy. And I was just fascinated by the whole genre, and I thought, I really want to do that. So I thought, well, there's no law that says I can't. So I did.
So what got you into writing in the first place? Was this particular series the first thing you ever wrote, or were there other previous writings that you had?
No, I've always enjoyed storytelling. I did a cartoon strip when I was in college. I wrote for television for 20-something years. So I've always been looking for some way to tell stories. I think for the longest time I didn't write books because there's such a, I don't know, it's a challenge. The idea of writing a book, it seems like, it's got to be someone a lot smarter than me. But after reading some books like 50 Shades of Grey, I thought, well, no, it doesn't take people smarter than me. And finally I just said, well, let me write a book for me and not for anyone else, and just have fun. And once I finished it, I was hooked. Now I want to say that book sucked. I mean, it was terrible. And I wrote another book, and it was better, and I wrote another book, and it was better. Black Phoenix is actually the 5th novel I've attempted. And by then I thought, when I finished it, I was like, okay, now you really have, this looks like a book. This reads like a book. I gave it to people to read, and they were like, well, why is it, this looks like anything I would pick up from the bookstore. So really it takes practice. And but getting that first one done, once that's out of the way, then you are hooked. You can't stop doing it.
And is literature something that you do for a living?
No. I do this mainly on the side. I do have a literary agent for work other than this. But no, I work in television. I write promotions.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. We actually have one of our Big Bang Crew members, Travis, who's actually going to be editing this. Has probably gone through. Did you go to school for that at all? Or?
No, I came in it completely from the back door. I have a BFA in graphic design, and I had a roommate who was working at public access television, and I was jealous. And I said, I want to do that. And I started volunteering at this place that used to be in Atlanta called the Video Music Channel. This is before MTV wiped out all the other channels. And after they went out, I got hired as a switcher, and I worked my way up to different jobs in television. So really, I got into television the same way I got into writing. It looked like fun. Yeah. It's like if there's something you can do all day and work your ass off and still say that's fun, then that kind of becomes your career.
So since you are emerging in literature right now, what kind of suggestions do you have for other potential up-and-coming authors that are maybe kind of trying to figure out how to work through the industry and try to get themselves on their feet, find an agent, have an editor, have a publisher?
Well, first, finish the book. That seems to be the biggest challenge for a lot of writers, and don't be afraid of people telling you that it sucks, and then trying again till you get it to where it really is the best thing you can write. And then there are places online that you can check that will tell you what kind, whatever your genre that you chose. This is the agent that covers that genre, and you do your research. You find out, okay, this agent only looks at, if it's an agent who only looks at women's literature and is looking for the next chick-lit book, you don't send her a dark fantasy book. You look for the agent who is looking for that. And you just keep sending it out, and hopefully they'll start responding, if nothing else, to say, I liked it, but I didn't like this. Which doesn't mean send it to them again, it means fix it and send it to the next agent and see if they like it. And eventually, hopefully one will like what you wrote.
Well, I just have one more question to ask you, and I saw this online and stuff, and I found it kind of interesting. You tend to wear a mask from what it looks like, and can you just tell me what the deal is with the mask?
Well, Allan Kemp is not my real name. It's a pen name, and I came up with the idea of doing the pen name for a lot of different reasons that aren't worth going into here. But once I did, I thought, well, wait a minute, Allan Kemp can be anybody I want him to be. So I really started having fun. It's like, okay, he's going to wear a mask, he's going to have glasses and a pipe. So it's sort of the mix of the wrestler and the writer at the same time. And in the first book, I even did a whole thing about who is Allan Kemp, and came up with all these absurd things of who he was. And then I couldn't remember any of them, so he's morphed into me. But here's the sad part, I already had the mask. Because years ago, the TV station I worked for, we had a deal with a small wrestling group called Deep South Wrestling, and I think they're still in business. And the guy who ran it was an old wrestler, well known in the business, known as the Assassin. And I had the opportunity to work alone with the Assassin, and he was a master wrestler when he worked. And he told the best stories, and he was a short, scared, fat, scary man, but I loved him and I admired him, and I found that mask that was similar to his, and sort of in honor of the Assassin, I had to have it. Because he, to me, was, that's a storyteller. Yeah. And in fact, when I watch wrestling, I was one of those people who's like, wrestling is faked, it's stupid. But then after I started watching it, I started going, as storytelling goes, these guys are brilliant. That's some of the best soap operas I've ever seen. So I had nothing but admiration for wrestlers, and so that's why I felt like, but I wanted to be the kind of guy who wasn't a real wrestler, who was more of the academic wrestler.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's really awesome. Well, Allan, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me and letting me pick your brain. We'll definitely be sure to take a couple clips of your books for the end of this video. And I just want to thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll look forward to seeing you at the rest of the con.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nerd Faithful. We'll see you later.